Hello, welcome to Cask to Glass, the whisky podcast, where we examine the heritage and flavour of Scotland's national drink and the world's favourite spirit. I'm John Beattie. Today we talk about troubled waters for whisky, and I catch up with Mark Kent, the Chief Executive of the Scotch Whisky Association. Mark, thank you so much for talking to me.
It's a pleasure to be with you, John.
Give me a glimpse then into what's happening. Just an open-ended question. When it comes to looking at the whisky market just now, what do you think's happening?
So if I had to sort of sum it up briefly, I would say that we're still very confident about the long-term potential of the industry. I mean, we've seen that with the opening up of the India Free Trade Agreement last year. India continues to grow, and we've got a great product, as you know, and we're in 180 markets around the world. So that long-term growth potential is very much still there. What we're seeing, though, and these figures kind of back that up, is still a lot of volatility, which is partly to do with international trade conditions, partly to do with the domestic situation we find ourselves in. And you'll know that we've had 17% duty increases in energy costs, general cost of doing business at home, which is really acting as a brake on the industry. And then we've got tariffs and the US. So if you look at these figures, what they show is we're just under 1% down in terms of value across the world last year, and in terms of volume, we're just over 4% down. So broadly speaking, the big thing which sticks out is that since tariffs came into force in the US, we're 15% down in terms of the volume that's shipped to the US. Looking around the rest of the world, Europe in broad terms has stayed pretty stable, as you probably would expect. It's an established market. And in Asia, India continues to rise. The rest of Asia is probably a bit more subdued than we would expect to see. And in terms of the sort of traditional growth patterns that we've seen over the past few years, we would hope that would pick up again this year. We'll see. Today is the first day of the Lunar New Year, which is traditionally a big time for gifting and celebration. So that's generally a boost to our figures. So yeah, we're watching that, but I think the short message is that we're going through a period of short-term volatility, which will inevitably hit our smaller members most, because if you look at their kind of trading patterns, it will generally be starting off in the domestic market, going into Europe, and then moving to the US. So you look at as I said, domestic situation in the UK is challenging. Europe, we've been through Brexit, which has been a sort of a volatile situation, and then the US, as I just mentioned, has seen a drop off in the last year.
Is it fair to say the US has had the biggest impact, and these tariffs really have hit whisky? Is that fair?
I think that is fair. Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, the US is our biggest market. So 20% of all our exports go to the US, and disproportionately, there's more of our smaller members who export to the US. The US market, as you know, is soft already. So if you've got a softening in the market for various reasons, plus tariffs, you're going to see more of an effect. And of course, it doesn't just affect us; it affects our supply chain. It affects our members who are present in both markets, and the US whiskey industry itself is suffering similarly. I mean, there's you'll have seen the news about pauses in productions, cooperages which are closing, and of course that's one of the symbiotic linkages between the US industry and ourselves is the barrel trade, where we have over recent years been buying up to 300 million pounds worth of barrels a year, and now because barrels are not being emptied, they're not being bought, and that is having a serious effect on the barrel production in the US.
Are you still lobbying the US? Because I know we spoke to the First Minister, John Swinney, on the podcast. He said he was lobbying, and people were talking to Eric Trump, who's at Turnberry quite a lot. Are you still lobbying to get tariffs changed for Scotch whisky?
We definitely are wanting to see a change in that situation, and we're kind of at one with our US colleagues on that. So the UK government and Scottish government are supportive of that. We have to get a deal over the line, though, and of course that's not us. It's the responsibility of the UK government to do that. As we understand it, the issue is still on the table, and talking and listening to what the government is saying, there's still hope that can be done in the next few months.
Is there a feeling that there should be more government help now for what's happening in the Scotch whisky market?
Look, I think that in some ways, sometimes we're a victim of our own success. It's a very resilient industry. It's well known. It's got a great product, and there's a feeling that come what may, Scotch will get through because it always has. And there's some truth that obviously we've got a great product and very, very resilient. But I think we need to be clear that this is a very difficult time we're going through. And you just have to read the papers to see about news about job losses, cutbacks in production, maltings which are closing. This is real stuff. And this is affecting the Scottish economy and rural communities in particular. So, when I go and meet up with the farmers, they say, well, what's happening with India? What's happening with the US? Because we're getting less orders through for the malting barley, for example. And then you look at right through the production chain to hospitality. Hospitality is being hit. Tourism's being hit. You do see people when they go and visit distilleries. People are coming from abroad, and I heard this about visitors from Germany the other day. They go and do the tour, they do the tasting, and then say, sorry, I'm not going to buy the bottle here because I can get it cheaper back back at home, because we have such a high level of excise duty. And it's the highest in the G7, is I think the fourth highest in Europe, and that does have an effect. So I think we need to make clear that the economy cannot expect the same level of investment and contribution to the growth agenda unless we are supported. And at the moment, there's a lot of headwinds, and that's a polite way of putting it, on the industry.
They can genuinely buy a bottle of whiskey cheaper in Germany, can they?
Yeah. So
crazy.
as you probably know, duty in the UK is over 70%. That you pay of the price of a bottle of whiskey, and in a lot of other countries it's a lot less. So there's no incentive for them to go and buy it when they're over here.
Well, I've never heard that before, but I fully understand it. So in terms of jobs then, how many jobs are in trouble, do you think?
Well, I mean, look, we employ in the UK, something 66,000 jobs is the estimate, and in about over 40,000 in Scotland. And we did an estimate last autumn that we think there'd been 1,000 jobs lost in the industry up until that point. I think that's clearly a lot more now, and we're talking about the thousands of jobs, and that's then multiplied throughout the supply chain. When you close a maltings, when you see that there's less demand at visitor centres, this all adds up. You just have to look in the media. So we're not, this isn't a moment of crying wolf or panic, but we need to be clear-headed and clear with the government that we need support in this moment to get us through, to be able to realise that potential for long-term contribution to the economy, which will come. And the companies which are particularly, feeling the pinch are the companies with least bandwidth, are smaller members.
What kind of support?
Well, I mean, one of the things that we've asked for example, in the home market, is to look at the regulatory burden, to look at the excise burden, and to look at the tax system, the duty system. So, is it logical that if you consume one unit of alcohol in spirits, such as Scotch, you pay 4 times as much duty as if you were consuming that in cider? There's an argument about not just the level of taxation in the UK duty system, but also the fairness of it. And when you compare across alcohol categories, there is no consistency. And then if you're asking what else we're looking for support in overseas markets as well. So, We've mentioned the US, which is the biggest and most immediate issue, but we also want to see the government continuing to open up new markets and open up market access conditions in some of the countries in Asia. For example, we look at Thailand, look at Indonesia, where the US has done deals, the EU have done deals, and we've got to carry on in there to carry on with being competitive in those markets.
Did I read the other day there was something about one in 5 distilleries?
You did.
That's quite. If that's true, that's quite a statistic. If 1 in 5 1 in every 5 distilleries is having a real issue in terms of as a going concern, that's a story.
Yeah, it is. No, I read that, and I can quite believe that anecdotally, because when we speak with our members, they are very concerned. There are real issues. So Scotch is not going to go away as a category, but we need support to ensure that we can first of all, secure the jobs in the industry and the supply chain, and then have the basis to enable the industry to then return to investing and contributing to the wider economy. I mean, we're the biggest food and drink export in the UK, as you know, and obviously in Scotland, we're 75% of Scottish food and drink exports. So we need the government to kind of step back and say, look, there's no logic to this. So we are engaging the government on the duty system as well as talking about the overseas markets. And then you look at things like the extended producer responsibility and regulation over that, which is putting another burden on the industry, which especially small.
Can you explain that, Mark? Can you explain what that means?
Well, so what this is to do with is recycling of bottles, recycling of glass, the scheme to do that, and how that works and how much is paid. The level of the fees is very high, and also we are concerned that we're not getting out of that that scheme what is needed. So we need high quality cullet, which is kind of crushed glass at the end of that scheme to make bottles again. And that is not working. So we're working through. This isn't an issue which just affects the Scotch whisky industry. Obviously, it affects other drinks producers as well. But it's just an example, together with, for example, the cost of energy, of the feeling that a lot of our members have. Going back to your point about 20% are distressed. It's just one thing after another at the moment. So we need to sort of step back and say, okay, how can we ensure we've got the launch pad to carry on in the long term?
What would be the one most influential intervention, do you think?
Well, I think there's two, if you look at it. So overseas, you look at our biggest market is the US, 20%, 10% tariff may not sound a lot, and it may be that we've got there are other countries who are worse hit. But when you're talking about small margins in a very competitive market, that can make a difference, and in particular to our smaller members. So we want, first of all, our main overseas priority is to see removal of the tariffs, return to the situation we had before, which worked very well for both the US industry and our industry. The US industry are kind of aligned with us, and it will help our supply chains as well. So that's one. And the other thing in the UK, which is specific to us, which can make an immediate effect, is a reform of the duty system, to ensure that the duty system is fit for purpose. Because at the moment, what you see is that the duty rates go up, and in effect, the money which is going to the Treasury goes down. So there is a point of no return at which you keep on raising and money's dropping in. So it's not serving any purpose for the growth agenda of the government.
Do you think we've just been, some people have been too ambitious and just built too many distilleries?
Well, I think that what we have to look at is the industry and the growth curve over the long term, and this has been slightly distorted in the context because you've got COVID, which saw spikes of demand and supply. The long term, you step back and you look at where we were pre-COVID, which was below 5 billion exports. you look at where we are now, you still see a steady growth. So the growth is going to be there, but everybody will have to make their own decisions about when is the best time to increase production, when is the best time to start a distillery. But what I come back to the point we made at the beginning, that long term, this is an important industry. It's an important contribution to the Scottish economy, and the prospects are good. But at the moment, we're going through very choppy seas.
What's your short-term prediction then, in terms of your modelling on these choppy seas? What's the short term?
Short term, I think it would be more of the same, John. I mean, you referred to the stats that we've seen, the difficulties which are being faced. If we don't see any change in the regulatory and fiscal environment back at home, that sets a bad example abroad. And I used to be an ambassador. I used to go and lobby against discriminatory tax rates abroad, and I'd be referred back to the UK system and saying, well, that's what you've got in the UK. So that's going to be challenging. The US situation is challenging. Now, if you look at the figures, as we showed before, that the overall export situation is not, hasn't fallen off a cliff. We're down just under 1%, as say, by value. So what we need to do is ensure we bring the whole of the industry with us on that journey to be able to realize the longer term potential that we've talked about.
Going back to the whole, Donald Trump is as Scottish as many of us. He's 50% Scottish. Do you actually physically lobby Eric Trump and Donald Trump? Can you get to them at all?
Well, that's for the government to do, and we're very conscious of the respective responsibilities of the government. I think there is a clear understanding of the importance of Scotch to the Scottish economy, and the importance that Scotch plays in the life of Scotland. I think also, as you would expect, the US government is negotiating hard, is looking at the economic basis. And one of the things that we've been very clear is to show the symbiotic nature, which is a word I learnt when tariffs started, how joined up we are between our two industries, so that tariffs actually prejudice the US industry as much as they do the Scotch industry, because of the nature. We have shared members, we have this barrel trade, so it makes good economic sense, and that's what we're saying to our US colleagues, who very much we lobby as one, and to the US government and to the UK government, that this makes sense for everybody concerned. It's a win-win outcome, and we need on both sides of the Atlantic this support at the moment.
And what do you think the long-term view is then? What's the long-term picture telling you?
Long term, I think the potential is clear. Look at the figures for India, for example. That's a bright spot, and I think we need to acknowledge that was a landmark deal last year. India is the world's biggest whiskey market, and Scotch accounts for something like 2.5%. So that the potential for Scotch to grow there and continue growing, especially when the free trade agreement comes into force, and that's going to reduce tariffs from 150% to 75%, is very significant. And the other thing that we need to do as the SWA, as the industry, is to ensure that our members can diversify. So especially some of our smaller members who weren't looking so much at a market like India because of the very high market access barriers. Now the challenge is to say, okay, well, how do we get into that market? And so we're working with the UK government, working with the Indians in terms of the Indian High Commission, the Indian Consulate General here in Edinburgh. We were just talking about this yesterday, to get more of our smaller distillers to get on that road into markets such as India.
Mark, good to talk to you. Sounds like a difficult market, but thank you very much for that. And just before you go, you still have hope. You think this is temporary. There's a little blip. We might get the tariffs taken down in the US. Maybe we can grow in India. We can also grow more in Asia. That's what you're thinking. But at the same time, there are quite a few distilleries here in Scotland under pressure.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was having a discussion with somebody, and I said, look, I'm not an optimist, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. And I think that's what we have to be. We have to kind of say things as they are. And go back to how we started this. Long term, the potential is still there. We've got a great industry. It's not going to go away. We're going to see markets continue to grow. What we have to do is to ensure that we have the support necessary to get to that longer term potential. And so it is difficult, but we are still pushing on some of the issues we've mentioned about taxation, about the US, and with a fair wind, we'll be back on track and continuing that long-term growth potential.
We're never going home. We're never going home. Can we stay with you in Scotland for the rest of our lives? We're never going home. Never going home. All it took was one sip of